Start the recording now, and we're going to today talk about some of those web-based methods. We're going to share resources with one another and also help you choose some of those career assessment tools or strategies based on what the job seeker's needs are, and then also spend a little bit of time, technology willing, hopefully, to demonstrate using some of the career assessment tools and strategies and resources. So before we get started with the presentation, I know we usually spend a little bit of time talking about challenges you may have experienced, talking about successes that you might have had. And I wonder, as we sort of transition into the content, if we wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. And just a reminder to please keep your cameras off during the webinar. And also, if you're not speaking, if you could keep your microphone on mute. It looks like everyone is muted at the moment. So, but before we get started, are there any success challenges over the last month, maybe 2 weeks since we had met last, actually, that people wanted to share with the group and maybe get feedback or just sort of highlight something that's been helpful for you during this remote job development that you're all probably still in the thick of? You can use the chat, or you can unmute your mic if you want to talk, if you want to raise your hand or somehow indicate that you'd like to say something, that's fine. So think about some of those successes and challenges and what you might want to get some advice around from your peers here on the call, and we'll come back to it. But let's first get into this idea of selecting a career direction using web-based resources. And I know we've gone through many of some, not many, but I think it was probably close to 2 years ago now, we did some work around values clarification, interest clarification, but we really didn't frame it around web-based. A lot of those tools are web-based and certainly helpful, but at the time we were really just looking at more than likely you meeting with an individual in person. So now we're really looking at this as an entirely, for many of you, remote or virtual way of assisting someone. When we think about values, we're really looking at those important ingredients to a job that make us want to go to work. They're the things about your employment setting that you hold to be very important. And if they were missing, you probably wouldn't be as successful or certainly not as satisfied. So we're going to look at some ways that you can use some online tools to help someone. What do you think?
Texas.
Oh. Yes?
Senator Ted Cruz.
I think someone might be on, not on mute. I'm going to just mute that. So some of the benefits of clarifying values might be what we see on the screen here: better job matching, building a relationship, and this idea of social capital. So if you're clarifying your values and you're finding employment settings that are really a good match for those values, social capital, which is kind of that capital that you gain through your interactions with others and the relationships that you're building that could help you in terms of employment acquisition or even retention. So for example, I have lots of coworkers and colleagues in different areas now. Many of you I consider colleagues and people that I now have built this social capital with. So any interactions that you make professionally and personally to build these relationships that may translate into employment or other career outcomes is really what we're talking about with social capital. If we wanted to just kind of distill it to a really basic way, it's important to better understand what's important in the job so that, again, you can make a good job match. It might improve job retention, and what are some other benefits that you think could be, what are the benefits that you think in helping someone clarify work values? You can use the chat, or if you wanted to unmute, whatever works best. Well, let's transition to thinking about what are some of your work values. So what are those important pieces or elements of a job that you find particularly rewarding, that help you feel more successful, more satisfied in your position? What are some things that you were all looking for when you began your job search? You can use, let's see. Independence. So Debbie identifies independence, absolutely. Serena, helping people. Diversity, a strong team, achievement. So those are all work values that I imagine if the employer didn't have that all of the work values that we are looking for, or some of them, we probably would be less successful, less satisfied, somewhere to grow, absolutely. And I guess my next question is, where did you all develop those work values? How did you know that these were important to you? How does one begin to define and clarify what your work values are? You can again use the chat. WorkSource Washington has an online assessment. Yep, Debbie, and I think it's probably the same one that we'll be showing today, or very similar, but again, the more resources that we can use. Anna, my parents, so you kind of hear that from your own upbringing. Someone else had mentioned personal upbringing, personal experience. I learned from my own mistakes. Absolutely, Aaron. So you kind of know when you get into certain jobs that, whoa, this is not at all what I thought. I have, realized through certain jobs that I've had that working under management that's sort of more, less egalitarian, and it's there's more of a hierarchy, isn't very conducive for me. My type of management that I like to work under is someone who provides opportunities for autonomy and making your own decisions. And you kind of learn that oftentimes through, like Erin said, your own mistakes or your own, bad experiences that you might have, like Rob mentioned. There might be good or bad experiences, but we learn from those. The lived experience, recovery, absolutely. So many of those work values come from other areas, not just employment experiences, but other experiences in our lives. Some common work values might be, let me just check, you can check these out, but Redonda writes, I had a work coach that was very supportive. She gave me a magic wand to pick any type of career I wanted. Okay, so having a supportive coach who said, what would be your dream job, right, Redonda? So maybe that coach said, what would be, if you were in the perfect job, what would that be? And you were able to really probably identify what that job would be, and more importantly, what were those characteristics or features of that job that really kind of made that a perfect job. And maybe it wasn't that particular, yep, so you knew you wanted to give back. So we have these values that are important to us, and finding work that connects us to positions that have some of those values is only going to translate into better job matching. Some of these common work values might be, many of you identified, opportunity for advancement, being creative, working as a team, working with my hands. So someone who likes to really like have hands-on work and work with their hands, working in an office away from people, not doing any sort of work with their hands or using their hands may not be a good match. A good wage might be important for some people. It might not be important for others. But we come to figure out our values oftentimes from our experiences, from our upbringing, like some of you said, our parents, but we also may have a hard time figuring out what those values are. One way that we can clarify a little bit more, hone in, are some of these areas. Like you can examine your own personal experiences. You can meet with someone that you're working with, a job seeker, and really kind of distill down what is it that your personal experiences have provided. What were some of the things you liked? What were some of the things you didn't like about, whether it's school, whether it's areas of their recovery. Maybe people were very involved or continue to be involved with recovery groups, and maybe those are personal experiences that you might be able to further examine. Past employment, past volunteer. So there might be other areas, and it doesn't have to just be limited to employment and education. Creating new opportunities, so people might volunteer to just get a sense of what it is that's important to them. Certainly a volunteer job isn't the end goal, and it's only really designed to help someone clarify values and get a better understanding of themselves. It could be informational interviewing, meeting with people who are in similar jobs or careers that you might be interested in. So those are some ways that, certainly can be done remotely, and certainly, you can figure out ways to talk with workers in different positions for informational interviewing purposes. But a lot of that can also be done in person, which may not be as feasible right now. So we're going to talk about some web-based methods, and these are the values card sort is, you can access it online, but it's really a PDF with different values listed that helps people, identify what those values are. And this idea of the ONET careers value card sort is what I wanted to go into this morning and highlight. So I'm going to do a new share and go into let's see. All right, just bear with me for a minute. Okay, so, oops. So I think you can all see this now. Maybe someone can just give me a thumbs up or yes, just to make sure. My Zoom has been finicky lately. So through, okay, good. Thank you, Erin. Through, and Anna, through the Career One Stop, which is sponsored by the Department of Labor, you can help someone virtually use some of these web-based tools. You can either, if you're able to Zoom, you could do just what I'm doing, sharing the screen. But I don't know, is anyone familiar with this particular work values assessment tool? Let's see. Yes, Hannah, okay. Isabella, okay. If you want to write in the chat what your success has been using the tool, just to give us some idea. Okay, Azaria, first time seeing this. People who have used it, just spend a couple minutes putting in the chat how useful you have felt it was, or easy to use, but it's a fairly, I think, user-friendly assessment tool. And I think it's pretty interesting how we can use this with people that we're working with. You can, again, like I said, have a Zoom or team and share your screen with someone, and they can walk through the assessment with your coaching and guidance. So it gives a little brief overview of what are work values, and kind of helps you orient the person to what a work value might be. And it gives you a nice overview of what assessments are, and they give all the different assessments that this particular Career One Stop offers. And then they have an interest assessment, they have a skills assessment. So they have lots of different resources here. And then they also have this work values assessment that we were just on. And I'm going to go into the work values matcher and just show you a little bit of how to use this particular tool and kind of show you how neat it is to come up with the responses. I don't know if we'll have a chance to go through and really, do the entire assessment, but it is very brief. And at the end, you get this sort of assessment of what your values are and what would be a good career match that matches those. So I'm going to get started with this. I just want to make sure you're able to see as I go through each screen. Just to give me another yes in the chat. Okay, perfect. All right, so read each statement on the card and think about how important that what quality would be in your ideal job. Like Redonda had mentioned when she was working, the person helped her kind of look at what is my ideal job. And then we're going to place the card in importance from most to least. So if you can see, this first values card is I use my talents and abilities. So if your ideal job is a job that you're able to use your talents and abilities, and that's most important to you, then you would take this and you would put it in the most important. So you're sliding this down with your mouse. So you might, depending on the skill level and how technologically skilled the person is you're working with, you might need to provide some coaching. Okay, Sharon's writing in the chat, I'm just peeking. Are there other assessment sites? I've used Career One Stop, but I don't know if it was applicable to my client. There are some other ones, so I will certainly provide some information on those as well. But just to orient people to the One Stop, I'm treated fairly by my employer. So, is that most, more, somewhat, less? That's just somewhat. I can stay busy all the time. So you're kind of helping the person look at where this particular value might fall from most to least important. And then at the end, and I've already kind of done this for myself, at the end you come up with, and I'll share with you if I go back to the screen, these results. So you can look at, and that's what I want to show, because it actually helps you to, let me see, go through and actually come up with a little bit of a plan with someone. Just get to it. Okay. So are you able to see, it says your work values match your results? I'm sorry, I have to keep asking, but for whatever reason, okay, I'm gonna assume that's a yes. Oh, not yet? Okay. No? Okay, let me, now? Good? Thank you. Okay, perfect. So of all of the 20 cards that I kind of put into their most to least categories, it came up with my most important value was achievement, relationships followed, independence was kind of right there in the middle, and then on to recognition, and then working conditions and support. And it gives you this nice, on the left-hand side here, kind of gives you a little brief bulleted list of what those values are. And then you can go into and talk with the person about what are those particular values. What does achievement mean as defined here? And you can have this discussion with someone about each of these values and what they mean. And it's helpful to have this discussion to begin talking about, well, what are some jobs that may be a good match? What are careers that provide independence or an opportunity to work independently? What are some careers that the working conditions are something that you value? And maybe that was something that you can have this discussion with someone about. Well, what is it about a working condition? Is it that it's safe? Is it that it's there's an opportunity to keep busy all the time? Is it that you're working alone, having a wide range of tasks to do and responsibilities? So really helping that person look a little deeper into what some of those particular values and what they mean to them. So let's move back to, let's see.
Can you see me? Can you hear me? I can hear you. Okay.
Yes.
I'm on a, how can I mute? Oh.
Is it Yarrow?
Oh, sorry. Trying to double
No, that's fine.
multitask.
I know, right? It does feel like that's all we're doing. Yep, you're on mute. So there are the results. And someone had asked for other methods for identifying work values. This work values card sort at the volume or the bottom values card sort is another way, and you can probably adapt this to a remote way, but these are PDF files that you download and you can print off, and it gives you again a whole list of different values similar to the values that we just saw in the career one stop, but also values that we saw earlier on, but a really expansive list. And it helps someone kind of sort through, again, least important, moderately important, most important, and you're having this discussion with someone, and those values include things like independence and teamwork and all of those things that are part of what we look at when we think about values. And again, it's designed to generate a discussion. The values card sort through the MI website doesn't really link to any particular job, and it would be the job coaches, job developer, your role to really help the person see what types of jobs may align with what those values are. And then another tool at the One Stop Center is, I'll show you this as well. And it's might be something useful for someone that you're working with. Yes, so the One Stop has, I'll share the screen in a minute. So again, this may be more conducive to kind of an in-person meeting, but I would imagine you'd be able to adapt this in ways that would be helpful online. And many of this is kind of adapted from what we just saw from that online version, but it adds a few more. But if this is more helpful for someone to have kind of these cards, you could even encourage them to print it out if they have access to a printer, or you might even be able to print these out and mail them to someone if you're still working remotely and having virtual meetings, so that when you meet with them, you each have a stack in front of you, and you're able to, again, kind of look at, I'm going to go to the top here, look at most important, least important, and not important at all, to help sort of clarify again what some of those elements are. Yes, Debbie writes, absolutely, this looks like a good way to identify individual goals for their job search and follow along plans. Absolutely. So in addition to helping with the job match, it's also a good way to begin planning for supports, planning for what those ongoing supports might need to be or might look like. That's a great way to really look at this for both the job matching and also job support angle, especially for people who don't know what they want. Yep. And again, these are kind of meant to be hard copies, but if you're still working virtually and you're able to use snail mail with people, pop them in an envelope and say, you know, we're going to talk about these values cards the next time we meet. I'll have a deck, you'll have a deck, and then we can work together to sort of identify, and I can help coach you along with looking and clarifying at some of these values. Let's see. So then we want to look at some interest identification tools. So values are important, and values and interests are oftentimes, you know, looked at together, but interests are a little bit different and kind of help us, again, really zero in on those employment settings that are going to be a good match. And it may also even help us, as was pointed out, identify potential support needs. So ways to help someone explore different interests are helping them to learn more about themselves as well as the world of work. So people may not know much about what their interests are because they may have limited work experience. They may not have worked for a number of years. The world of work, the employment settings may look very different than they did potentially when people were working, or it may be a young person who hasn't had an opportunity to learn much about what the world of work is. So this idea about learning more about yourself as well as the world of work is really helpful to expose people to new information, help people to really examine work environments that they think they might like, or even work environments in general, to pull out what is it about that work environment that might be interesting to them. So it's a little bit different than work values. It might be more task related. So, you know, does someone have an interest in, you know, automotive, or an interest in communicating with people? And again, they can overlap with values because working with others could be the value, but the interest might be using your you know, skills in communicating on a daily basis. And web-based resources are through ONET, the Interest Inventory Profiler, which I wanted to spend a little bit of time. And my next, has anyone used any of the ONET resources or interest inventories? Yes, Aaron writes, ONET, very accurate, absolutely. So ONET is really very broad, very expansive. Yep, Azaria, love ONET. what is it about ONET that you love? Maybe that'll help others get a better sense of what the tool is used for. But we are going to go into it and talk a little bit more. Yep, Leslie, I do it all the time. It's my go-to. How do people respond to ONET? I know that it's a very broad, has lots of information, and if you really are unfamiliar with using it, it can be somewhat overwhelming. Erin writes, it gives real jobs based on education and experience level. Yep, so it helps match not just values and interests, but also education and experience. Seems to provide good connection to careers that match individuals' interests. And it's also, looks like, oh yeah, that's a very good point, Azaria. Helps when working on a resume or cover letter, because you can pull key terms from ONET that might help you craft a cover letter for a particular industry or for a particular job that the person might be seeking. So we're going to pop in and look at ONET. For some reason, my internet I'm not able to use my hyperlinks today, so I apologize. So I'm going to have to go out and just, let's see. Yep, ditto Azaria's comment. Yep, Rob, I agree. Well, let's pop into ONET and give people who aren't familiar with it an overview. And so for people who are familiar, maybe that's something you can kind of chime in if you have anything to add or include. That would be really helpful. So ONET is based on, yep, I agree, Erin. It's a good discovery tool, learning things about yourself that you weren't aware of. So when we look at the interest profiler, it really is based on, oh, let me see. Good? Is it, you guys good now? Just wait for the, yes, okay, perfect. It's based on John Holland's codes. Oh, perfect, thank you. So those codes are realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. So it goes into a lot of detail about what those mean, but and I actually included all of those in the PowerPoint that we don't need to review for the purposes today, but you'll have them as a resource when you're working with people. So for example, you're working with someone and you're using the interest profiler and someone is uncertain what these RIASEC codes mean. You can find it on here, but I also added some kind of bullets on the slides that you can also look for. So the web-based version is really looking at the type of work activities that people find exciting and interesting. And it's done in a very cohesive way that actually even translates, as many of you said, into careers that could be potential options. So it gives a whole narrative about what it is, and you can go in and we'll peek at what the interest profiler looks like. We can go in and peek at some of the questions, but it's about 60 questions about work activities. It goes from strongly dislike all the way to strongly like, and then there's an opportunity for codes in the middle there and an unsure, uncertain code. But let's look and see. I like this part of the ONET interest profiler where they really elaborate to the person to not think about if they have enough education or training to do that work or how much money you would make doing it. Just think about if you would like it or dislike it. So you're really not thinking about, can I do it or can I do it? The intent of this is for you to really help someone figure out a direction to go. And with that direction, multiple types of positions and job opportunities potentially under those career fields. And maybe some of those might be more matching values like money, or they might match the more preparation that the person has, or might inform you and the person of additional education or training prep that they might need to do for the work. But for this particular tool, don't think about that with the person. Have that person really go in just wanting to answer the questions that they like or dislike doing that work. Again, no right or wrong answers. It can really go through a nice description of how it's really supposed to be that genuine response the person feels. And this is what it looks like. It's not so visually awful. It's actually kind of a nice layout, I think, and each of these colors are correspond at some point to different types of interests you'll see. But you go through with the person and you can tick off, or they can tick off building kitchen cabinets. Does the person strongly dislike? Are they just dislike that? Unsure, like, or strongly like? So I don't know if we want to have someone on the call right now sort of walk through a little bit, and we can begin to just kind of apply this in real time. Kind of would be a quick way of doing it, but it would at least give you an idea of what the results would be. So if someone would want to volunteer, that would be great to kind of go through and I can click off these questions, and we could be modeling how this might look if you're working remotely with someone and you're sharing your screen and you're engaging in your conversation in this virtual manner. Any volunteers? I hear someone attempting to get off, or maybe I'm wishfully thinking that someone's coming on, pushing the unmute. Okay, so we won't demonstrate. Oh, let's see, we have something in the chat. Okay, Erin, that would be great. Do you want to unmute and we can kind of go through it, just the first section? Okay, Leslie has a very good point. I like that. When I do this with clients, I recommend that people are black and white in their answers, either liking or not liking the subject. I think that's probably a very important part to do that.
People could have told me when I was like,
all right. So I've taken this before and I have a little Post-it note
Oh, good.
with all of my results if you want those.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So my R, which is realistic, is 23, the score is.
Okay.
The I is 18.
Okay.
The A is 35. The S is 39. The E is 12 and the C is 19.
Okay, so what's the highest? I was trying to get a pen to write it down, but so what are the top three in order? Codes.
So S is spatial, right? Or whatever. Social, 39.
Okay, and then next?
Artistic at 35.
Yep.
And realistic at 23.
Yep. So does that seem about right? Social,
mute start,
artistic, and realistic. Does the social, the fact that the S is so high, seem like that makes sense for you?
Well, it's kind of funny because when I did it, I looked at the top career choices with my
Mhm.
education and it said employment specialist. And I was like, boom, I'm in the right field.
Yes. It's interesting. I bet many people on the call would probably have very similar combination of these codes. Could everyone please check to make sure that they're muted? We're hearing some feedback. Thank you. So you can go through all of this, and at the end, when you did this, Aaron, were you able to connect your SAR to specific careers?
Well, yeah, it's like I said, the career of my choice. I mean, I got 10 years experience doing this,
Yeah.
and this is what I want to do forever. And it was in the top 10 results. So I was
Yes.
like, you know, and that's, I had one of my coworkers do it, and she's our data lady.
Okay.
And like data management came up on
Mhm.
her career interests, like her top 10 as well. So I think it's really accurate.
Yes. So we don't have time to really go through from beginning to end today, but I would suggest, and based on your experience using it, Aaron and others, was it a fairly user-friendly tool that that you'd be able to, if you kind of navigated through the website a little bit and kind of looked at some of those directions, it would be fairly easy to sort of go from beginning to actually getting that code at the end and transferring it to careers?
Yeah, I think it's useful. It's kind of hard to do over the phone because I have some people that like don't have internet access or whatever. So we, you know, I use like 1 to 5, 1's low, 5's high,
Yeah.
or whatever, you know, to try and do it that way. But
I
yeah,
think that's, yeah.
I've given the link to people who do have internet access and they play around with it and they tell me about it. So everybody
And
seems
then
pretty satisfied.
I like that idea from the 1 to 5, not having, you know, just sort of using the numbers. And it may even be helpful to email if someone has access to a computer or someone in their life has access to a computer, and you can kind of download those categories so that when you're walking through someone, they can have it right there with them. But yeah, there are ways to use these tools. These are designed to be web-based. And so now is really a good opportunity to use some of those web-based resources. So I mentioned that the RIASC tools, EC tools, or codes come from John Holland's theory of personality. This is sort of a quote that he, the choice of a vocation is an expression of a personality. It's sort of our interests and personalities per se are directly in line with certain positions. And just like Aaron mentioned, you know, that social, artistic, and realistic happen to match up almost exactly to your career here as an employment specialist. And that was going through that profiler. But there are some other tools, and you're all able to see the Holland theory of choice on the screen here. Just want to make sure I'm not back. Oh, that's okay. Can you guys, you can see, I'm not still on the profiler, am I? So again, not to get into too much with John Holland, but just to kind of frame where, thank you, where this all came from. And it's based on this idea of his theory of career choice, that people look and seek out environments where they can really use skills and abilities. So it goes back to that job matching. People act and feel at work the way they feel is very dependent on the workplace environment. So finding those environments that are going to be a good fit is really important when we're working with people in terms of the initial job match, but also, as others had mentioned, on supports and what types of supports, you know, if it's a good job match and it's based on individuals' interest and values, then maybe the likelihood for supports might not be so significant. I do. There's a reference for Holland in the back. This is taken from actually What Color Is Your Parachute by Richard Bowles. These are the areas for Holland. Yep. And then what I thought we could peek at, so here's just a little overview of what realistic is. The doers, kind of, people enjoy manual activities. People fall into this category, kind of learn by doing, very practical things that can be touched and seen. And this is an example of a position in that type of realistic personality area. People who are investigative are thinkers and analytical. People enjoy logic. This idea of being drawn to puzzles and ambiguous challenges is kind of helpful. People haven't been in the workforce, sort of really exploring these other areas. So I'm just going to go through this pretty briefly or quickly, just so you can see some of the characteristics of each of these areas. So artistic are the people who are creative and flexible and seek opportunities for self-expression and use their creativity and imaginations. People who are social and helpers might help solve problems, similar to what you're all doing. You're in the field of helpers. Enterprising are the persuaders, so sales, public speakers, people who are in those types of roles. People might value promotion and power. Conventional are considered the organizers, very efficient. They like jobs that are conforming, organized. They might be conscientious. They like to have well-defined instructions. And can you imagine if this is where you're drawn towards and you're working in a job that really is not very organized and the instructions aren't very well defined? You can certainly see how that wouldn't be a good job match. And also in terms of supports, it probably would be very difficult to identify supports that would help in terms of, if this is a more value related area, it's hard to accommodate something that is more intrinsic to what the person's values are. So it's easier to accommodate more tasks. So if someone is interested in a position or interested in a certain type of career, but may not have the skills or may need an accommodation to better adjust or address whatever functional implication they might have, that would be more, I don't want to say easier, but a little bit easier to accommodate than someone who just doesn't have that value. So this is from the Richard Bowles book that's referenced in the back. This is called the party exercise. I love this exercise because, again, this could be something you could be doing, whether it's in person with someone or web-based, sending this to the person beforehand and kind of asking them, and maybe sending that list that I just provided of all of the RIA, SEC characteristics, or creating something on your own, but helping that person sort of look at, if they were at a party, what would be, and this is a classic exercise, what would be the first corner of the room or area of the room that they would be drawn to. And you would have them sort of read what those descriptions are, and they would come up with, similar to what Aaron came up with, a 3-letter code. And that 3-letter code could then be transferred to getting some different additional information. So my code, I did this a while back, was ERA, and that's translates into several positions, and some of those were around cooking and being a chef and a baker, and it was interesting because that is what many of my, or where many of my interests are. It just doesn't happen, you know, certainly the job I'm in now has some of that, but it was interesting to kind of see, based on not thinking about if I had the skills, not thinking about if I had the experience to do anything when I was completing the ONET tool online. It directed me to this, and I was truly just completing it with the sense of like or dislike, not if I could do it, what the finances were, anything. So when you go into the interest profiler at the very end, like Erin kind of came up with her code, it also now helps you sort of coordinate that with careers. So you're able to really help someone hone and zero in on certain types of careers. So I would like to just show you briefly what this looks like. I think it's important for you to see kind of the culmination of coming up with these codes. And again, if you're not able to work with someone using the actual interest profiler, maybe you could, are you seeing the ONET? The ONET online. So here's my 3-letter code that I came up with using the profiler online. As you saw, you could also do that party exercise with someone. May not be as accurate, but you know, it's not that far off. If you were asking that person what area of the room would you be drawn to first, second, and third, you could still come up with a code. So here are all the different codes or positions and occupations that came up with my ERA. And I kind of zeroed in on this, chefs and head cooks. And if I wanted to dig deeper into that, I could click into it and it could give me education requirements, experience requirements. You could even dig deeper and it could even direct you to job postings that are in your area. So I would suggest spending some time yourself fooling around with it, because it's really sort of an interesting web-based tool that has a lot of potential with many of the remote and virtual work that we're all continuing to do. So before we end, are there any questions? You can type those in the chat, but while I'm waiting, we can also think about how you can use this maybe moving forward. So I would encourage you to think of a person who's receiving services, participating services from your agency, and they might be having a difficult time finding work. Think about what are the barriers that are preventing this person from working. And then also think about 3 ways from today that you learn to assist the person, and how would you apply these strategies? And then also sort of begin thinking about what additional supports might you need to help the person in the job search. So really sort of begin thinking about how to sustain some of this material, and using maybe a person who might be having a difficult time and identifying the barriers, and maybe considering using some of the ONET profiler tool or the values clarification tools that we just talked about. Yes, Serena, you will absolutely have this sent to you later, so you'll have all of the resources, and you'll be able to click right into the hyperlinks. For whatever reason, I did a backup and mine no longer work, but you'll have all of those resources. What color is your parachute is new, and then the online ONET resources right there. So are there questions that people have before we move on? And another learning application, I'm going to leave this in here because you might want to use it sort of if you're a supervisor. Maybe it's something that you and people that you're supervising can work on together, or even you and individuals participating in services can do. But it's just sort of a way, again, to structure how to apply what we just reviewed. But you'll have all of this. Dawn will send out the PowerPoint at the end. Probably once I get it to her, hopefully by the end of the week, I'll do that. If not, I'll send it to her by the beginning of next week. But if there aren't any questions, maybe can spend a minute or two thinking about what types of content or topics you'd like to see in future job development calls. We really want to make sure the calls are addressing specific areas of interest and need that you all have. So you can write those in the chat, spend a minute or two typing in the chat what types of, okay, engaging with employers I'm seeing as okay, so that's, thank you, Renesha, that's great to hear. So we'll spend some time engaging with employers. Also, our remote job development concerns still something that people are managing and sort of struggling with. If so, we can create some content and topics around that area. So yeah, think about what it is you'd like to see in future calls. You can type those in the chat now or let Dawn know, but I think we're gonna I think it's at the top of the hour, and I thank you all for your great participation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in April. Hopefully it'll be really spring-like on both coasts. So thank you again, and have a great rest of the day and weekend.